du pays. Je tiens à vous remercier infiniment, Dr Raouf Gafar, expert en économie, pour ces explications. Et enchaînons avec toujours l'IATF 2023 qui est tenu cette année sous le thème « Construire des points pour une ZLECAf réussie ». En effet, la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine vise à stimuler le commerce intra-africain en offrant un accord entre les États membres couvrant ainsi les investissements, les droits des propriétés intellectuelles et de la politique en matière de concurrence. La ZLECAf pour une Afrique prospère. Un commentaire.
La zone de libre-échange continentale africaine ZLECAf est entrée en vigueur en mai 2019 dans l'objectif de constituer un marché unique pour les biens et services au niveau du continent basé sur la libre circulation des activités et des investissements. Il s'agit d'une zone géographique continentale dans laquelle les biens et les services circulent sans restriction entre les États membres de l'Union africaine. Elle vise à stimuler le commerce intra-africain en offrant un accord commercial global et mutuellement bénéfique entre les États membres couvrant le commerce des biens et des services, les investissements, les droits de propriété intellectuelle et la politique en matière de concurrence. La zone supprimera progressivement les droits de douane et fera baisser les barrières non tarifaires. Elle aidera à améliorer les infrastructures de qualité déplorables et les postes frontaliers inefficaces. Elle facilitera aussi la circulation des
تنفيذ هذه الاتفاقية لزيادة التبادل التجاري، لزيادة الاستثمارات، لتسليط الضوء بشكل أكبر على الثروات الموجودة في القارة الأفريقية وأهم ما تتمتع به السوق الأفريقية. وهذا أيضا يجعلنا نفتح ملف مهم جدا يوسف، هو ملف الصادرات المصرية الذي بيعتبر من أبرز الأولويات الخاصة بالدولة المصرية بكل مؤسساتها، هو ملف زيادة الصادرات المصرية، وذلك من خلال بالتأكيد العمل على التعريف بشكل أكبر بالسوق الأفريقي،
invading more horizons in the African markets and opening new logistics centers for the Egyptian exports. Yes, Egypt is presenting to the African continent experience, expertise, all the possibilities and all the facilities to realize economic integration among different African states. Holding this edition or having the last edition of the fair in 2018, and now it returned back to Cairo after 4 years. Egypt is hosting this very important economic summit. It's another proof or a reflection of what Egypt had done, retaining its position in the regional and continental files to retain the economic position via different Egyptian factories working in different African states to raise the performance and the capabilities of our brotherly nations in Africa. Also, we are supporting the African Development Agenda 2063. This is to achieve African integration in front of the whole world. The volume of the trade exchange between Egypt and African trades reached $7.8 billion in comparison to 6.5 billion in 2021. This is a reflection, as we said, of the Egyptian positive role and keenness to exist in the heart of Africa. Of course, politics cannot be separated from economy. Egypt is all the time involved into the African worries Egypt is taking all the time into consideration the African continent and how to develop its human resources and its natural resources, and to benefit from all the resources in Africa, the rich continent, rich with their human resources, all natural resources. This is to revive and to raise the standard of the African peoples via national and intercontinental projects. There are presidential directives for all the state institutions to improve the trade exchange between Egypt and other African states. Also, more projects in the field of infrastructure, expanding the projects in entrepreneurship, all for the best interest of this strategic goal of Egypt, which is economic growth, industrial integration, opening new horizons, opening new markets for Egypt inside the African continent. Also, another file which is very important, that the main goal of this economic integration among different African states and between Egypt and other African states is to work on realizing growth for the African peoples, to raise the standard of living to all African peoples. And this is the main goal from all the trade exchange, and to increase and to boost trade cooperation among all different African states, and to improve the infrastructure. And of course, in light of Egypt's presidency of NEPAD and of the African and Egyptian efforts for development partnerships with all expertise dedicated to achieve this goal and to achieve the business atmosphere, the Egyptian business atmosphere, African business community, and to invest in it in a huge way. Also, to return back to the Egyptian exports file, it's a very important file. There are all the time many efforts exerted to boost Egyptian exports, whether to the African markets or to international markets, to have more foreign and hard currency, to boost the Egyptian exports to the whole world. There are plans which are put very much accurately by different state institutions and ministries to realize this goal, as we said, whether to the African market or to international markets. Also, to increase our imports to the African markets and to realize more expansion in trade exchange between Egypt and the other African states, to boost infrastructure projects, to realize industrial integration, to boost entrepreneurship, to realize this main goal of the African economic integration, to boost the standard of living of the African peoples. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are watching from Al Manara the arrival of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to inaugurate the Intra-African Trade Fair IATF 2023 in its third edition. The theme of this year's event is Building Bridges for Successful AFCFTA. The IATF was created as a platform for entry into Africa's single market of over 1 billion people joined together through the African Continental Free Trade Area. 2 successful editions of the fair took place. The first, it was in Egypt 2018, and the second was in Durban, South Africa in 2021, and now the IATF returned back to Egypt in its 3rd edition, IATF 2023.
الحضور الكريم اسمحوا لنا أن نبدأ بالسلام الوطني لجمهورية
Let's start with the national anthem of Egypt. Now the anthem of the African Union. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all on the land of peace, cradle of civilization, Egypt, in the IATF, or the inaugural session of the Intra-African Trade Fair in El Manara Hall. I'd like to speak a little about the IATF 2023, which is held by the AFRICSM, the African Export Bank, in collaboration with the EU and the General Secretariat of the African Free Trade Zone. It started 5 years ago in 2018, and it took place here in Cairo, and it returns back to Cairo in its third edition. As the second edition of the IATF was held in Durban, South Africa. The IATF Fair 2023 introduced such a distinguished opportunity via the platform to have an access to the integrated African market with more than 1 billion people, with the domestic product of $3.5 trillion, including 9 main components. The trade platform, the creative African bonds, platforms of cooperation among different countries, automotive fair, and the emerging corporations fair. I'd like to invite Minister of Trade and Industry Ahmed Samir to address the nation. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, presidents of our African brotherly and friendly nations, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like first to extend my appreciation to you, Mr. President, to honor the Intra-African Trade Fair, this event which Egypt is really proud to host for the second time in its third edition. And I'd like also to thank the AFRICSM, the EU, and also the General Secretariat of the the African Free Trade Zone, in cooperation with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, at a time when the African states are recovering from COVID-19. The Russian-Ukrainian crisis erupted with all its repercussions, whether on Egypt or in other African states, and it had its negative repercussions on all the economies in the region, something which requires full cooperation and find untraditional solutions, and to overcome all the national and local obstacles in front of many companies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's agree together that the intra-African trade is going to remain low if we compare it with the global trade volume. And here comes the importance of the African content-free trade deal, to have a single market in Africa, to facilitate the movements, and to guarantee that the capitals are going to go in their place, to realize social sustainable development, and to realize also gender equality, industrial development. This free trade zone in Africa is going to be the biggest in the whole world, including 8 industrial zones, to have a single African market, 1.3 billion people, with gross domestic product equaling $3.4 trillion, and it's going also to participate or to share in achieving sustainable development, and to offer more job opportunities, and by this to raise the competitiveness of Africa. Also, it's going also to share in boosting the intra-trade in Africa, whether in commodities or in projects. Ladies and gentlemen, and in the frame of the political keenness to expand the deeply rooted ties among all African states, we are hosting this fair with the participation of more than 75 African companies, hundreds of investors. We held a number of sessions and discussions, and we signed a number of deals and accords, nearly with $3 billion investments, something which reflects the depth of cooperation among the different African states. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ensure that the Ministry of Trade and Industry, with our political leadership director, will spare no effort to boost the relations between Egypt and other African states, to boost green economy deals and the digital transformation, the fourth industrial revolution, and to boost trade exchange via the Egyptian vision of 2030. I'd like also to indicate the GTI, which was launched by the General Secretariat in 2021, paving the way for more accords. Egypt was keen to be of the first members affiliated or joining this initiative to activate the free trade agreement. Also, I'd like also to highlight the importance of cooperation among different African states in different projects, and also different initiatives which were proposed during the fair, with the participation of African institutions in many projects, whether in infrastructure or in any other fields. I'd like to reaffirm the Egyptian keenness to boost cooperation among all different African states, and particularly the intra-African trade, and to wish success for the fair as it did in the last two editions. Also, I'd like and I wish for all the countries and companies to realize the maximum benefit from this fair, and to exchange visions and expertise, and to gain the fruits of a real and active trade exchange among all of us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Everything started here. From here, the world we know started. On this land, humans were born. We established a civilization, and the world continued afterwards. From the land of Africa, the motherland, and the beginning, for millions of years and until today, the African continent has been the land of treasure and opportunities. Every inch of it generates life, and under its soil, there are unparalleled treasures that no one else has. Just from Africa, we can plant, manufacture, and produce for the entire world. And with the hands of its sons, the impossible becomes possible. And as joint hands can do so much, we had to complement each other. And our engagement with one mother had to extend throughout the continent. From here, Egypt launched the first edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair in 2018. And in 2019, it signed, along with 54 African countries, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA agreement. The goal was to boost intra-African trade by 50% by 2035. On the land of Egypt was the first meeting. The first edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair was an opportunity to meet. We heard each offer, transferred expertise and cultures. We opened new export markets and signed agreements to facilitate trade. We saw what each one needs and what they can offer. This year, Egypt hosts the third edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair. Our goal is to open the door for thousands of investment opportunities and for Egyptian exports to penetrate new African markets, to bring together the people of industry, trade, investment, arts, literature and history from all parts of Africa straight to the heart of Egypt. Our journey in Africa is a life journey. There is a lot to be achieved together. The Intra-African Trade Fair is our opportunity to meet, our opportunity for tomorrow.
أدعو فخامة القائد أولوشينغو أوبوسانجو رئيس المجلس الاستشاري المعني بالمعرض الأفريقي للتجارة البينية ورئيس السابق لجمهورية نيجيريا الفيدرالية بإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية ومضيفنا الكريم سعادة إماسين مناغوا رئيس جمهورية زيمبابوي، سعادة الدكتور لازاروس شيكورا رئيس جمهورية ملاوي، فخامة بروفيسور بنديكت أوراما رئيس ورئيس مجلس إدارة البنك الإفريقي للتسعير والاستيراد
of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank,
وكيل مني الأمين العام
the
لمنطقة
General Secretary
التجارة القارية
of
الإفريقية
the African Continental Free Trade Area,
سعادة السفير ألبرت موتشانغا
Albert Mochanga, Your
الاتحاد
Excellency,
الإفريقي
the
للتنمية
AU
الاقتصادية
Commissioner
التجارة
for
السياحة الصناعة
Economic
والمعادن،
Development,
أصحاب الفخامة رؤساء الدول الممثلين هنا، الإدارة التنفيذية للبنك الإفريقي ورؤساء
the executive management of the
الدولية،
African Bank and heads of international organizations,
الضيوف الكرام
ladies and gentlemen,
وزملائي في المجلس الاستشاري
my colleagues in the African Consultative Council of Intra Africa Trade, on behalf of the Intra African Trade Fair 2023 and the Consultative Council, I'm really honored to speak to you on the occasion of the Intra-African Trade Fair IATF 2023.
فخامة الرئيس،
Mr. President,
اسمحوا لي أن أرحب
permit me to welcome you
إلى معرض التجارة البينية الإفريقية
in the Intra-African Trade Fair IATF 2023 here in Africa, in Egypt.
إن الكلمات لا تكفي للتعبير عن
I cannot
سعادتي
express how much I am happy with the success of this fair until the moment.
عندما انتهت النسخة الثانية
After the second edition finished in 2021 in Durban, and now you're hosting the third.
أنه سوف يكون هناك معرض تجارة بيني.
Of course, there is going to be a fair, a wonderful one, and it was supposed to be in Abidjan 2023, but there were a lot of preparations. There was also a lot of achievements. Then some circumstances took place, and we searched for another host, and it was our good luck that the government of Egypt, which hosted the first edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair, rescued us and saved us.
إن هذا كان يعني أنهم قدموا لنا هذا المكان
It said that they presented and introduced to us this wonderful place to host the third Intra-African Trade Fair.
كانت الإعدادات بضعة أشهر فقط قبل مثل
Only
هذه
3 months,
الضخمة.
only just a few months we took for preparations. Of course, we cannot blame those who wondered if this can take place on the ground in this very short period of time, but the government of Egypt proved that they are up to the responsibility. Here we are today, celebrating together. This event, this fruitful event, Your Excellency, Mr. President, we thank you very much. We thank you, along with the members of your government, with your full support, and we appreciate that much. In fact, it was to the credit of the efforts exerted by the African governments and the organizers of the Intra-African Trade Fair, and also other personalities, the top executives who exerted the utmost effort to have this as a story of success, and all those who came here in person to join us in this event. Through the fair, all the products which were exhibited, and also through the forum of the investment and industry, and also the African automotive fair. Via the emerging companies program affiliated to the AU, the African Union, via all the activities among different industries which was supported by the Intra-African Trade Fair, it really realizes its goals, and we realized a tangible progress from an addition to the other. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at what we have achieved since the 9th of November, when the Intra-African Trade Fair was inaugurated, what comes to my mind to say that this is a wonderful, marvelous, stunning edition. The presence, the attendees, despite the fact that the political situation in the world, what we have achieved is really great. The great exhibition of African products, this also another thing which is the support of each other. Also to sign accords and deals, it's another wonderful thing. Today, our motto, we connect African markets together, and we are going to move from this to make the African markets only one single huge market, 1.3 billion people. And in fact, I cannot thank enough thank this one who is uniting and unifying efforts, Professor Benedict Orama. I cannot thank him enough, the head of, or the CEO of the African Export-Import Bank, African Bank, who is the leader, who has a vision, a very clear one. Also, I'd like to thank and to express my appreciation of the one behind Mrs. Kanayo Awani, who was behind holding the Intra-African Trade Fair, the Vice President of the African Export-Import Bank, Africsam. All my appreciation and respect to all your efforts, and I'd like also to thank Ambassador Albert Mochanga, the EU Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry, Mining and Tourism, for all his efforts, which played a pivotal role in gathering us here now. And we're going to continue on depending on your efforts. In the very same time, in the same context, I'd like to say that without the commitment of the General Secretary of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the General Secretariat of the AFCTA, we owe him a lot. I'd like also to continue with my appreciation to the government and people of Egypt with the warm and generous hospitality. Also would like to thank you all, particularly I'd like all the time to return back to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, to thank him that much for his relentless support to all African goals, and all also the efforts exerted to guarantee that this event was held at a perfect timing. Also, I'd like to clarify and to highlight your efforts as you introduced a lot to improve the infrastructure in Egypt. This is to facilitate the trade exchange between Egypt and other African states. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you who responded to our call and came here on behalf of the move which aims to unify Africa economically. We will not be able to achieve this on the ground without your attendance and existence. Whether it's the exhibitors, the businessmen, all those who sign deals and accords, all participants, thank you. Thank you very much for all of you. And we apologize to those who are, for a reason or another, they could not make it. Ladies and gentlemen, as a final assignment, before I leave the theater, I'd like to announce, after reviewing the demands or the requests to host the coming edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair 2025, the Consultative Council has chosen Algeria as the host of the 4th edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair. Congratulations. We extend our congratulations to the government and people of Algeria for the choice, and we hope that we are going to meet together in Algeria in 2025. At the same time, I'd like to express my appreciation to all the members of the Consultative Council, particularly Mr. Ekra, the Vice President, and also to all the organizations and people who worked hard to reach the moment we are living right now. You're most welcome, and I'd like
It's goodbye, but we're going to leave and we're going to meet you in Algeria in 2025 edition of the fair. And now we are going to
Your Excellency, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Excellencies, President of Zimbabwe, Your Excellency, President of Malawi, Your Excellency, former President of Nigeria, and the President of the Intra-African Trade Fair, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Professor Benedict Orama, the CEO and the head of the African Export-Import Bank, Africsam, Minister of Trade of Industry, our host, Mr. Ahmed Samir, Your Excellencies, heads of international organizations and ministers, the exhibitors, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to echo what Mr. Obasanjo said, expressing our deep appreciation for the Egyptian state. Of course, on top of it, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to host us today in the very same hall we were in December 2020 to inaugurate the exhibition. And via this success, through this success, the fair grew more and more to be one of the biggest platforms in Africa to support entrepreneurs, youth, trade, to give them the opportunity to express their commitment to trade in Africa. Your Excellency, Mr. President, I, of course, hail and appreciate the efforts exerted by the Egyptian presidency in the African Continental Free Trade Establishment. Egypt was one of the 6 countries to start a trade according to the rules of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The private sector in Egypt was permitted to exchange trade with the African countries. I'd like also to thank the government in Egypt for its leadership and to join us in implementing the free trade area on the ground. We took all the procedures and measures to establish more trade companies under this umbrella, and which are already working with companies in Ghana, for example, to boost trade among different African states. I'd like also to congratulate the African Export-Import Bank, which helped in allocated $700 million for African companies, something which is going to accelerate the African integration, the market integration, something which we are aspiring to achieve, which is this intra-African trade fair helped in boosting trade and in building bridges among different African states. As we all know, in February 2023, the EU conference depended or issued other mechanisms, whether competitiveness or the intellectual property rights, also the investment protocols. I'd like to announce that it is already acting as we speak. The African investors are studying this protocol and looking at this protocol as a way to boost and to support their investments and trade. This protocol is going to explain an investment agency is going to be established to boost investment in Africa. The ministers of trade will put another protocol related to electronic or e-trade and digital trade, which is going to permit boosting infrastructure and to include more youth who are going who already knew much about e-trade and about the most recent technologies. I'd like also to highlight that 6 years ago, the African Union we celebrate the establishment of the African Union for 60 years, but 30 years ago, African Bank was established. We celebrate 30 years of its establishment, the African Export-Import Bank. And 3 years ago, another child was born. It's the African Continental Free Trade Area and its General Secretariat. The efforts exerted by the African Bank and the General Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area achieved a lot of progress in a very short period of time to establish the settlement and payment system, and was adopted by a number of African governments. Also, the establishment of the adaptation fund costing $1 million, and we already announced the creation of the special structure for guarantees. Huge sums of money were allocated to this, as I said before, the trade companies affiliated to the African Continental Free Trade Area are already working, and the Egyptian companies were the first to work in this regard and under this umbrella. What is really clear that we as Africans, when we cooperate together and when we are partners, this is really boosting the high values, and we realize a lot, we achieve a lot of results. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that all our consultations are going to reach successful results. Ladies and gentlemen, with this song, which is presented from the Intra African Trade Fair 2023.
It's a new beginning, higher grounds we're lifting up. Nothing holds us bound. Can you see it? The light of Africa is rising to higher grounds. We're lifting up. Nothing holds us bound. So come on and come on. We call on, oh Africa, come let us build a dream for all. Together we grow stronger and united. Paint out the sky with the bright colors of your flags and say goodbye to the darkness of the past. We're stepping forward, we're rising up. Oh, Africa, our time is now. Break down the chains, clear the lines that separate, and shine the light on the things that make us great. We're stepping forward, we're rising up. Oh, Africa, our time is now. Oh, 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 oh.
والآن مع كلمة معالي السفير ألبرت موتشانغا مفوض التنمية الاقتصادية والتجارة والصناعة والسياحة والتعدين بالاتحاد الأفريقي، فليتفضل.
شكرا جزيلا السيدة مديرة المراسم صاحب الفخامة السيد عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس
President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Your Excellencies, Presidents of countries and governments, Obi Sergio, the head of the Consultative Council of the Intra-African Trade Fair and the former President of Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to be brief, and what I'm going to say to you, of course, I convey to you the greetings of Mr. Musa Faqih Mohammed, the EU Commissioner, who was not able to come for some emergency reasons. In fact, he is conveying his greetings and best wishes for the Inter-African Trade Fair 2023. I would like to thank the Egyptian people and government for the warm and generous reception we had here since we arrived in Egypt, and also we really appreciated the Egyptian efforts which hosted this platform. By the end of the day, I'd like to thank all of you, as we are the co-organizers of this event. In fact, inside the African Union, we shoulder this responsibility. We do have dialogues, continuous dialogues, and so we do have 3 tents, whether for youth or women, and for all those who are working closely with the African Union as the the African free trade area has its wings. This exhibition is being held at a time where instability prevails. In addition to climate change, other incidents are taking place. Also, the world trade also is suffering. All this pushed us to work with more flexibility to reach African or to realize African economic integration. There's a lot of data regarding or around trade, and to boost the inter-African trade, according to what was decided by the African leaders. This is a part of the African integration process to let Africa move forward to achieve progress and prosperity. Finally, I'd like to say that in different pavilions in the trade fair, we can know what's going on inside each country. Swaziland, the president, for example, was here, and he said there are supports from Switzerland, for example, and there are many products which were introduced in this fair. We can improve these conditions a lot. Of course, I don't want to forget the small, medium, macro companies which are participating in this fair. Also, to speak about the deals and protocols which will be signed through this fair regarding the youth newcomers and youth entrepreneurs who are going to take care of all these things and all these files, in addition to protecting intellectual property rights. And now the developments witnessed in the different editions of the fair, they are behind us, and now we should work and move forward among different e-developers, partners for the African production supply series. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Musa Faqih Mohammed, the Commissioner, for the success of this fair and all what was achieved to boost African development, to reach prosperity. Thank you very much for your attention. And now with the speech of the CEO and head of the African Export-Import Bank, Afrixim.
Esteemed hosts,
أصحاب الفخامة، فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي.
Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Excellencies, heads, presidents of different African states, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, Your Excellencies, top guests, members of the Consultative Council of the Intra-African Trade, my dear wife, who joined me too, ladies and gentlemen. Just a month ago, there were several preparations for this event, and it was in their peak. And unfortunately, the war on Gaza started, and we did not have political knowledge about what's going on and how the humanitarian challenges we have are going to grow or continue, and there are demands for the resources imposed by the conflict in Gaza on Egypt. But it's real that we succeeded in holding this event despite all the challenges. It's really a proving our determination and will to have an integrated Africa via trade and investment. It can be implemented on the ground. Maybe we do have this barrier which can absorb all of these shocks in different crises. Also, to be here, this is another proof of how the Egyptian economy is resilient. And on behalf of the African Export-Import Bank, which is a collaborative organizer of this event, I really to express my happiness, to express my appreciation to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his government to agree on hosting the third edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair 2023. It's not only in the middle of this developing crisis, but also in a very short period of time. In fact, there are unprecedented and unexpected circumstances which were really obstacles in front of holding this event in Cairo, and we know that there are a lot of complications related to holding such a big fair, but the Egyptian government gathered all agencies and concerned bodies and introduced all the facilities. Egypt succeeded in hosting this fair only in 8 months because of the developed infrastructure under the leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It's really a wonderful thing. Your Excellency, Mr. President, we thank you very much. Also, we'd like to welcome and to thank His Excellency or the presidents of the states and governments who are here with us, and also the prime ministers from the Caribbean. And we are going to continue on depending on your support to Africa. We thank also the President of the Consultative Council of the Intra-African Trade Fair and the former President of Nigeria and all the members of the Consultative Council for their serious efforts which resulted in our gathering today. Also, special thanks to all the sponsors, representatives, the buyers, the investors, all those who shared in making this event a story of success. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the initiative of the Intra-African Trade Fair resulted in a number of benefits for Africa. In fact, we consider it a platform to fulfill all the ambitions of our ancestors who established the African Union in 1963. It's a platform which enabled us to free us from the remnants of the occupation, which kept Africa undeveloped and without realizing development. In 1930, the occupation forces said that the African economic development can be implemented if the raw materials were used, but via imposing, when the occupiers depended on their manufacturing and on their industry, we were not able to benefit from the African resources or to connect with the rest of the world. The occupation stopped us from realizing development and or to reach manufacturing our raw materials or to enter industrial phase or to realize economic progress. Then to realize economic progress, we should stop and oppose this occupation policy and to start manufacturing, which was not at all a wish for the occupier. Now we cooperate together in the field of trade, but the intra-trade in Africa, it needs to understand our markets, and so it's very important it was very important to establish or to create the African Union in 1963, and because of that we held African trade fairs, and years after that we realized that on the ground via this fair, the Inter-African Trade Fair, we also launched this initiative of Inter-African Trade Fair. We put the past aside. So the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, and other entities, they introduced a number of opportunities and show them there are some products which we obtained from India with 3 times the prices. The price we could have from Ethiopia, for example, Burundi and the other African states. They can offer a lot and provide and introduce a lot of its products to the whole world. There were unexpected things since the first edition of the fair, which was hosted also by Cairo. We started to see a lot of unexpected things. In 1918, for example, there were many deals which were signed to build a dam in Tanzania, and because of these efforts, this deal was financed by the African Export-Import Bank, and through the second edition of the fair, a lot of deals and agreements were signed to build a road between Nigeria and Niger, and also the African institutions financed this project. And in the Intra-African Trade Fair in 2021, South Sudan signed another deal with which they are going to buy corn from Malawi, and this way also the finance was introduced by the bank, in addition to financing SMEs or small and medium projects, whether in 2018 or in 2021. These are the deals and agreements regarding the infrastructure industry, in addition to more services. In the trade fair, we expect that a lot of deals are going to be signed, and also to ink deals for new projects via or through the exhibitors who are showing their products, and the visitors, they visit them in their pavilions. So we expect that we boost connections between African partners to achieve more cultural connections. For example, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to the variety of activities which took place through the past 7 days, there is also another initiative, which is food security, which is going to permit us to use our financial resources and our water resources to supply the African states with food. There were a number of opportunities in the field of agriculture, and we thank Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and all those who realize the importance of intra-cooperation among different African states taking into consideration or into account the issue of African security, I'd like, before I end my speech, to remind all of us that we are all working together to make the African free deals beneficial for all African states. They should not end here. They should continue. All efforts should continue to work together and to work with the African Union Commission to present all the supporting tools to boost trade. And in fact, we should continue with the spirit which really erupted and was clear in this fair. All of the trade banks joined our system, and they made the financing operations less costly, with less costs. There is also the settlement mechanisms and payment mechanisms. Also to have this guarantee plan, which was inked with the African Export-Import Bank. It's going to help a lot in cross-border trade in Africa with less costs. The cross-border trade really decreasing the costs and decreasing the usage of a foreign currency. Also, there is another agreement which was made by the African Export-Import Bank for this initiative. And would you please, I'd like you to know more about this initiative and other initiatives. Today, we added another initiative, more initiatives. We do have the initiative of the engineering contracts or the ready-made building contract, which was introduced to African companies to have their bid in, to have their different bids, to boost capabilities, to introduce finance and to introduce guarantees and technological solutions to help companies to be included into these initiatives. These initiatives are going to help the African contractors to participate or to have their share in many investments, which equals more than $60 billion all over Africa. These contracts, before they wanted to non-African contractors. I'd like to thank Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, Minister of International Cooperation of Egypt. I'd like her to join us to launch these initiatives. In the name of God. Your Excellency, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Republic of Egypt. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like we launch this platform from Egypt through the activities of the third Intra-African Trade Fair, one of the biggest platforms which gather a large number of African states. To launch this platform is very important as it has such a positive role to realize the African agenda of sustainable development. It's boosting African companies' partnership in infrastructure projects and offer more investment opportunities and facilitate exchanging data to expand partnerships and the twin agreements to boost efforts in the field of engineering, and this was a demand by African leaders. Also, it was asked, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave his instructions to realize a partnership in the field of infrastructure with the hands of the African youth. This platform, it's a response to deal or to end the three gaps
the financing gap data map and skills gap. The financing infrastructure gap equals $70 billion annually, so the platform is working to deal with the financing gap, to boost international cooperation and to attract more investments in the field of infrastructure, and to end the gap of exchanging data with full transparency of exchanging data among different parties, also dealing with the skills gap with boosting technical support to develop skills with workers to work hard together, and this is not going to be realized except with full cooperation among different states. Egypt is really working to have more job opportunities and to have this kind of positive connection among all parties. And to boost all these efforts, I'd like to honored that this platform, which is going to be launched today with the gate of the International Cooperation Ministry, I'd like to thank Mr. Benedict Orama, the CEO of the African Export-Import Bank, for supporting us in launching this platform, and the share of the bank in boosting the African companies in Africa with contracts equaling more than $12 billion in the past 5 years. I'd like also to ask all other partners to boost the African companies for finance and less costs of finance, and to continue with supporting the infrastructure projects. Thank you very much.
سيادة الرئيس، هل لحضرتك تعقيب؟
شكرا جزيلا. واسمحوا لي ان انا
Permit me first
في البدايه ارحب بكم جميعا.
to welcome you all of the presidents of countries and governments, Malawi, Zimbabwe, all the participants in the fair. I'd like also to welcome all the companies which had their share in the Inter-African Trade Fair. In fact, as we listened to all the speeches before, it's really very important to boost intra-African trade among different African states. We speak about economic capabilities, huge ones, huge natural resources in all fields, whether in agriculture, in mining, in all fields. We just are lacking the coordination and the positive cooperation among us all, and of course with the support of all the companies which can play a positive role. I will not forget to thank you for the positive participation of you all, and to special thanks to the head or the president of the African Export-Import Bank, African Bank, Dr. Benedict. I really thank you very much for all the efforts exerted. And here in Egypt, you should be sure that we are very much keen to have this positive support to all African nations. Egypt is all the time trying to have a positive role for the best interest of all peoples. As you see in Africa, there are resources, there are capabilities, but there are some obstacles and problems
impede progress, but we are involved into construction, into development, and to cooperate together in different fields. And to thank you very much. Again, I welcome all of you. I'm very happy to have you here in Egypt. And thank you very much.
Everything started here. From here, the world we know started. On this land,